Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Malu Gracia, and I serve as an NXUnite team member at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's panel. Today's panel topic is boosting your digital engagement strategy, making the most out of Salesforce. And as usual, before I introduce today's panelists and we jump into this fascinating topic, I do have some quick logistics to cover. NXUnite by Nexus Marketing serves as a powerful community resource designed to foster connections and facilitate lasting relationships within the mission-driven sector. On NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, and cost-driven podcasts. NXUnite also hosts webinars, demos, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks with me here today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. So at any time during the panel, please feel free to drop your questions in the questions tab, or you can drop them in the chat if you want. And we'll spend the second half of the panel addressing as many as we possibly can. Now, if you're having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, my team member Anton is backstage under the Team NXUnite username and ready to assist you the best he can. I also wanted to share that this panel is being recorded so people can continue to register and access the recording after the panel. So if you have any friends in the industry you want to share the insights from this panel with, just simply send them that same registration page and they will be able to access the recording. Finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I want to thank you all for attending this panel, whether you're attending live or watching the recording. We're very excited to be in touch with you, the mission-driven community. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today to learn from these outstanding experts who I'll now finally introduce. I'd like to first introduce Chandler Cox, who is the Director of Salesforce and Enterprise Business Segments at Omatic Software. He leads the teams responsible for partnering with nonprofit organizations to solve their most pressing data and technology integration challenges. Chandler has spent the last 12 plus years working alongside nonprofit organizations to implement technology that drives mission impact. Thanks for joining us, Chandler.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be with everyone this afternoon.
Also with us today is Christina Skarmias, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Mowgli. She's a tenacious marketing leader who combines grace, grit, and creative joy to drive innovation, evolve mindsets, and accelerate transformation. She is obsessed with personalizing experiences to drive connection and engagement. So great to have you, Christina.
Awesome to be here with everyone.
Also with us today is Roxanne Fry, who is the founder and president at Rockstar Solutions. She's an experienced C-suite executive with more than 20 years of nonprofit management experience. She's a technology-focused process improvement solutionist who helps nonprofits streamline their operations, maximize the use of their CRM, and leverage other technology tools to better serve their donors and clients. Thanks for joining us, Roxanne.
Thanks. It is wonderful to be here. This is an exciting panel if you're a geek or you just want to learn more about Salesforce.
Absolutely. And finally, with us today is Rubin Singh, who is the president and CEO at OneTenth Consulting, a boutique consulting firm and registered Salesforce partner that works exclusively with nonprofits for their technology strategy and CRM implementation needs. Rubin is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience in the CRM space and over 15 years in the nonprofit sector. So great to have you, Rubin.
Thanks so much, Malu. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right, now it's finally time to hear from our panelists, and Christina, I'll have you start us off with the first question. How can nonprofits leverage Salesforce to enhance their digital engagement with donors, volunteers, and stakeholders, and what are the key benefits of doing so?
As Roxanne mentioned before, when we were getting on the call, this is like one of my most favorite topics. So I'll spare you from my 10-minute long points, but gosh, I just think that, the power and effectiveness of Salesforce for a nonprofit organization is really centered around having that true North Star of data integrity. And with Salesforce, it's not just that core platform, it's really that entire ecosystem of the native applications like Mowgli that nonprofits can leverage and amplify to really customize their strategy. I think it's just for nonprofits, I want them to think that with Salesforce, all of your data is in one place. And so those silos that you're constantly fighting and those organizational friction points, you can actually eliminate those across your entire nonprofit organization stakeholder lifecycle. So that centralized data really allows nonprofits to really have real-time visibility into everything across the lifecycle of their donors, of all of their volunteers, of all the personas, which allows them to then efficiently and also focus on the stakeholders' immediate needs and priorities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for starting us off, Christina. Rubin, I'm going to bring the same question over to you. Any tips in using Salesforce to boost digital engagement, and what are the benefits?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you for that. And I agree with everything that Christina said here. And as we all know in this nonprofit space, it's all about the relationships. And the more I know about the constituents I'm working with, the partners I'm working with, the better it's going to allow me to cultivate those relationships. So a lot of the organizations I work with, when they go to a contacts profile in Salesforce, they want to see all those interactions. They want to see any recent touch points that they may have had with that constituent. They want to see any donations where they might have participated in a recent event, their interests, their preferences on how they like to be communicated with. And having all that information is really going to allow us to have that tailored digital communication with them, connect with them on the programming that might resonate with them, and really make it a more personalized experience. So, to take it a step further, Salesforce also allows that, the technology for constituents to engage directly with your nonprofit through the Experience Cloud, and also engage in a community with one another, other constituents that have similar interests. So there's all kinds of ways that Salesforce can help facilitate that. I will bring up one thing, and I think it might be helpful for those of you who are kind of new to the Salesforce world in the nonprofit space. Salesforce does offer 10 free licenses, 10 free subscriptions to any registered 501c3 nonprofit, which does make it a little bit easier for some organizations to get engage with Salesforce. I'm sure we have some thoughts on how best to leverage that, or what those 10 free licenses mean, or what it should mean. But just know that is available through Salesforce's Power of Us program. And as I said, it does kind of lower to some extent that barrier of entry of people engaging with Salesforce or nonprofits engaging with Salesforce for the first time.
That's very helpful information, Rubin. All right, Chandler, what would you like to add, and how Salesforce can enhance digital engagement and the key benefits?
Yeah, for sure. So I totally agree with Christina and Rubin for sure. I'll say, we touched on this a little bit already, but just the general nature of the Salesforce platform, I think, is a big advantage for organizations in terms of driving digital engagement, right? You mentioned different key constituencies in your initial question, right? With donors, volunteers, stakeholders, and maybe even more, right? Maybe individuals who participate in programs, right? They can all be accessed in the same platform, right? So already we're increasing visibility across departments. And in my mind, the very first step in optimal digital engagement is having the data necessary to power your engagement campaigns and journeys that you're after, right? And whenever I think back to the end of your question, why does this matter? What are the key benefits? In my mind, ultimately, the key benefit of enhancing digital engagement is pretty simple. It's increased revenue, right? If we take donations as an example, for nonprofit organizations who can provide, a personalized, stewardship and engagement plan within 48 hours of a donor's first gift, those supporters are 400% more likely to make a second gift, right? So if we really put that in perspective, most organizations, we have 70 to 80% of our first-time donors that don't even come back for a second gift, right? Imagine we working really, really hard to acquire new donors, only to have 3/4 of them never to come back again, right? So one takeaway that I would encourage from today's session, if nothing else, is to better understand your stewardship processes overall, right? So how quickly are we engaging with donors post-giving, or really any action for that matter, event, et cetera? How do we have the confidence in the data within Salesforce to drive the engagement necessary? And then, after evaluating those two questions, what are the steps that we can take to improve these processes?
Fantastic. Thanks, Chandler. All right, Roxanne, final thoughts on how to utilize Salesforce to improve digital engagement and what are the benefits?
Well, I think the key to using and leveraging Salesforce in that area is to actually use Salesforce for those things and not live out of spreadsheets in other places. This may come up in a later question, but really think about how many spreadsheets you're using out there. Some people will tell me, oh no, we have everything in Salesforce. And I'll say, well, how many times did this person go to your food bank? Or how many times did this person come in for a class? And they're like, oh, let me pull that up in this other area. So you can't engage fully unless you fully have the information in Salesforce, and it drives decisions. So if you're looking at making choices between a program that's really successful, it has a lot of engagement, or one that doesn't, then you at least have the data to show that. And you can say, okay, well, this program's not performing well, so should we eliminate the program and focus resources someplace else? Or is this program really important, so we need to put more resources to it to bring it up? So trying to keep everything in Salesforce, and Rubin had great examples of all the things that you can put in there. I'd also recommend that you take advantage of the offerings beyond the Nonprofit Success Pack. For example, the program management module. I just had mentioned programs. That's a free add-on, and it can really enhance what you're doing if you're a direct service-based nonprofit and you want to track those stats to be able to get more funding, like Chandler mentioned, and you need to submit these grant applications. So really focus on, you'll probably hear it 10 times from at least me and Rubin, make it your single source of truth to keep everything in there, and have that ceremonial burning of the spreadsheets to make sure you can get all the data in there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roxanne. All right, we're off to a great start. And Chandler, I'll have you start us off with the next question. What are some common challenges nonprofits face when implementing Salesforce, and what strategies can they use to overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, really good question. So I'd say, speaking from our experience at Omatic, I'd say one of the areas that often falls by the wayside is, and we've talked about data already a couple times today, but is around data management. I know from last year, actually, the Salesforce.org nonprofit trends report shared some really interesting stats around, I believe it was 76% of nonprofit organizations do not have a current data strategy. And, what makes it even tougher is, from our experience at Omatic, connecting systems and solving integration challenges, we know that on average, nonprofit organizations are leveraging, 5 or more solutions outside of Salesforce, to Roxanne's point, right? Spreadsheets and more to manage data. And so I would encourage folks to really begin to think about how you use data today and where you want to go into the future. Understand all of the data assets maybe that your organization owns, right? Where are we collecting data within our organization? And then, begin to shift the culture, right? To one where, data can be trusted and used by key stakeholders at every level. And, selecting really the tools that your organization can use to realize your data strategy goals. Just a couple things that come to mind for me.
Thanks, Chandler. All right, Roxanne, I saw that you dropped in the chat that this is one of your favorite topics. So over to you. What are some common challenges when implementing Salesforce and how to navigate them?
Well, I think the biggest one is not working with someone who knows the platform. So, Rubin's certified partner, I'm a certified administrator. Volunteers are great as long as they have experience on the platform, are committed to seeing it through, and can help with all the stages. However, many volunteers, for example, haven't actually worked in a nonprofit. So if you can work with someone who has lived and breathed the nonprofit world, it makes a huge difference. I've been brought in to take over after a consulting firm that didn't have nonprofit background, and came in and really worked through, for example, how are you operating now? How do you want to operate in the future? What processes can support you here and now? And to tie into that, a big failure in the configuration and implementation process can be only thinking about the now, right? Well, this is how we do things. Take this time to think through what could be improved so that your CRM can complement your process now and in the future, because that's a big difference. And then the other one that just really jumps out to me is a big challenge is bringing in bad data and somehow crossing your fingers that Salesforce will magically make it correct. And that doesn't happen. I'm sorry to crush anyone's thoughts that's a hope out there. But do your cleanup in Excel, do it outside of Salesforce. Obviously, you can do some things to clean up inside the platform, but by far the best process is to clean up outside. So take the time to do that. Actually importing the data, pressing the button and clicking a few things, that's the easy part. The harder part is getting the data clean enough that it makes sense and you're going to have good data to work with going forward.
That's great. Thanks, Roxanne. All right, Rubin, what would you like to add to common challenges during implementation and how to overcome them?
Sure. I was going to mention data too. So I think we all have some similar battle scars here, but I would say the other thing is definitely not having a clear expectation or understanding of what Salesforce can offer, and that expectation alignment is clear. I often say if your only frame of reference of what Salesforce can do is what you saw at the big screen at Dreamforce, then you might be disappointed. And Salesforce is obviously it's an amazing, innovative tool, but it is a platform, and it's not just something you plug and play and let it magically raise all your money. It has a lot of great functionality out of the box, and that continues to increase and improve year over year. But I would say that the organizations I work with that get the most out of Salesforce and recognize and realize the true power of it are the ones who are tailoring it to their business processes. They're tailoring it to their programs. They're adding third-party apps that enhance and extend the application of the platform. They're integrating it with data sources so that they can get that sort of 360 view of the constituent, as we've been talking about. So it's these, and that takes time, that takes money, that takes resources, that takes the right consultants to support you, and it surely doesn't happen overnight. So I think those organizations that kind of come in with that expectation that, okay, yeah, this is what we're starting with. And I start everything, even in the sales process, with an out of the box demo of Salesforce. And if I feel like folks have not seen it or have not really engaged in it much, we start with that even before we work with each other. Because I want everyone to know kind of what our starting point is. And then we can go from there, build out phases accordingly. But I think having that expectation alignment is probably once we resolve that, things are a lot smoother with the implementation moving forward.
Thanks, Rubin. All right, Christina, what would you like to add to some challenges and how to overcome them?
Well, I will just double tap on everything that all of my wonderful colleagues here have said about our data integrity. But gosh, I just wish I had a magic wand so we could clean up that data before we even would put it inside of Salesforce, but we don't. So I think my greatest advice that I would give any nonprofit is rely on trusted experts, rely on consultants, and rely on your implementation partners to help you to make sure that you have alignment with your key internal stakeholders, and they can help you plan out your roadmap to success in your implementation. I always am proud to recommend our trusted partners for our Mowgli clients. And the key there is starting off with a great roadmap and a great partner who has done this and helped support nonprofits. That, to me, other than the magic wand, is my greatest piece of advice.
Thanks, Christina. All right, very quickly, I'd like to remind our live audience to start submitting your questions at any time so we can address the topics that are relevant to you and your team. All right, here's our next question, and Roxanne, I'll have you start us off with this one. Considering the ever-evolving digital landscape, how can nonprofits stay agile and adapt their Salesforce strategies to meet changing engagement trends and donor expectations?
Great question. I think it was Chandler who mentioned, trends reports through Salesforce, through maybe the state nonprofit association where your organization is based. Staying up on trends just doesn't happen naturally. You have to be intentional about it. So, for example, if you are still marketing to the male of the household, you are probably behind in your fundraising efforts because most studies show that the primary philanthropic decision maker is the female in the household. So you have to just be aware of that and intentionally seek out the information on those trends. You can also, I also had some ideas. Obviously, stay engaged with the Trailblazer community. There are people out there posting questions that may trigger a question for you, or just whatever they've posted, you go, oh, hold it. I should be thinking about that too. So your Trailblazer community is your friend. Feel free to post questions. No question is too dumb. No question is too silly. People are willing to help, which is one of the things I love about the Salesforce community. Also, try to stay in step, set yourself a goal of spending some time in Trailhead. And Trailhead, for those who don't know, it's the free online learning platform that Salesforce offers. If you are a person who likes to have a gamified version of life, that's the place to be. You can earn your points and your badges and your confetti while you're learning at the same time. So the key there is that Salesforce is constantly putting new trailheads together in there. So there's never a lack of new information to gather. And I know that sounds like a lot to stay up on. I need to stay up on the trends. I need to stay up on Trailhead and Trailblazer. But if you're working on your time management skills at the same time, probably just set aside maybe an hour or 2 hours max every Friday morning, for example, if it's slower in your world on Fridays, and be intentional, be proactive about what's happening in the industry, what's happening on the platform, and what's happening in the community.
Totally agree with being intentional. Thanks, Roxanne. All right, Chandler, on to you. Any insights in staying agile to meet changing engagement trends and donor expectations?
Yeah, totally agree. Roxanne, I think, hit the nail on the head in staying in tune with some of the industry resources, and certainly Salesforce does a good job of that as well. I think another angle maybe to look at this is, being willing to challenge the status quo. And also, I'd say acknowledging that donor expectations have evolved. It's no longer a nice to have to personalize communication and engagement with our supporters, right? Our supporters demand it. If we're not doing those things, today at our organizations, leading organizations are. So, maybe a helpful exercise, certainly for folks that are live on Salesforce today, maybe to put yourself in the shoes of a supporter at your organization. What's that experience like? What are ways we can stay agile and adopt technology, change the way we use Salesforce to help improve the way that we engage with donors?
Thanks, Chandler. All right, Rubin, over to you. How can nonprofits adapt their strategies to meet changing engagement trends and donor expectations?
Thanks. I think when I think about nonprofits staying agile and how best to do that, and this might seem like a very simple recommendation, but it's a little tough to implement. And that is something we encourage all our clients, is to have a whatever you call it, a governance committee of sorts, or a committee that, once you're live, you are continuing to have regular discussions about Salesforce and how you can continue to evolve it. There's the biggest misconception out there that once you go live on Salesforce, you celebrate and everything's great and the old system's gone, and then that's it. Like you're done. And I think, again, those who really get the most out of Salesforce are the ones that recognize that it's a living and breathing system, just like the trends are and just like your organization is. So Salesforce needs to evolve along with it. So we work with many organizations that meet regularly, even if it's once a month, to say, hey, what's working, what's not working. They have a good way of prioritizing things and making decisions about what enhancements need to be prioritized, or what third-party apps we want to add, or what we might want to decommission or deactivate that we don't need anymore. So those organizations that are able to, that they have a process for prioritizing and making decisions on how to evolve the product, those are the ones that stay the most adaptive to the new technology and the new trends and the new elements of their nonprofit that they need to support. So I think that governance and having that sort of structure allows you to stay agile for whatever else might be coming your way.
Thanks, Rubin. All right, Christina, we want to hear from you as well. What are your thoughts on how to stay agile and adapt to meet changing engagement trends and donor expectations?
Yeah, I think, I always encourage, the hundreds of nonprofits that we work with to really adopt an omni-channel approach to their engagement strategy and to meet their donors, their volunteers, and their stakeholders exactly where they're at. And what that does, when you build a multi-layer engagement strategy, that tends to cover all of your personas, and you'll be able to gain insight on the specific engagements and trends that each of those personas respond well to. So my thing is, if you're using Salesforce, your number one goal should be that all of your digital engagement-based outreach should originate there. We keep driving that point home. Have that commitment to, gosh, it's time to get out of those mail merges and let's get back into Salesforce. Think about leveraging text messaging, for example, or different ways to use forms and surveys and NPS templates to engage with your donors and constituents. Omnichannel is key, and you can learn a lot about that, just as Roxanne mentioned, through the Trailblazer community. Lean on trusted partners. Check in with the apps that are on the App Exchange. There's a myriad of possibilities to be able to connect with your donors on apps that live and breathe right inside of your Salesforce instance.
Wonderful. Thanks, Christina. All right, Rubin, here's our next question. For professionals on the call who may be new to using Salesforce, what are the key factors and best practices they should keep in mind?
Sure. I think for best practices, it's to start slow, and one approach that we always talk about with our clients is the crawl, walk, run methodology. Like there's so much that is in Salesforce and you can do with Salesforce. And there's a lot of peer pressure in this industry. You have to digitally transform and integrate everything. And those who kind of break off more than they can chew, it can be really problematic and very costly. So what we often recommend is, let's phase this out. Let's start slow, and let's customize as less as possible and really learn how the tool works and all the great innovations that have already been built in it. And then after you use the system, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, now let's start talking about some smart configurations or customizations or integrations that we might want to add in. Obviously, there might be some things you need right from the get-go, but really being mindful and thoughtful about starting slow, not over customizing, and just slowly iterating and improving over time. And not all, that doesn't work for all consultants. A lot of consultants like to come in and want to do as much as possible for as long as possible. But I think this is where nonprofit consultants in this space think of it differently. They know how challenging that can be and dangerous that can be. So I think really that crawl, walk, run approach is key. The other thing I'd briefly mention is take this opportunity to reevaluate your business processes. So if just taking that step back to say, how exactly are we doing things right now? How do things flow from person to person, from process to process? Are there things that we can simplify? Because the last thing you might want to do is find like an outdated process or an inefficient process that you're just rebuilding in Salesforce. It might just continue to cause frustrations. And so I'd say that Salesforce, and now you just have a very expensive system that has those same processes broken. So I think really just taking the opportunity to reevaluate your processes, seeing what you can simplify in advance of the new implementation, it's going to serve your project considerably.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Rubin. All right, Christina, any advice for those new to using Salesforce, and what are the key factors and best practices to keep in mind?
I think we covered a lot on data integrity. I also would encourage nonprofits to really resist that temptation to customize their org. With the frequency of Salesforce updates that come every year, we have seen like custom functionality is really going to provide like a Band-Aid. So work with your Salesforce experts, whether they're in-house or your trusted consulting or app partners who can help you solve specific problems via configuration tweaks. And again, go to the App Exchange. You can find amazing solutions on the App Exchange like Mowgli and other native apps that will be able to help you really build that bespoke experience that you need without really tangling up your org.
Thanks, Christina. All right, Roxanne, anything to add to best practices new Salesforce users should keep in mind?
Yes, I agree with the over customization can cause a nightmare when the only person who knows how to do it leaves, right? You want to be building Salesforce with a good succession plan. So you want more than one power user, for example. Make sure you have 2 people. Well, I would limit the number of people who can edit everything, right? So really be thinking about that and how your workflows work with the limitation on who can update information. Because pretty soon, if you have everybody updating it, and I'm sure Rubin's seen this too, we go into organizations and they have everybody as a Salesforce admin. And so then you need to start going, okay, does that person really need admin access? And if so, tell me why so we can work through that. I would also, I don't know if anyone's heard about this, but there's a site, I think it's called Org Confessions, and it's by Salesforce administrators who post their confessions about what has gone wrong, right? So some of them are pretty technical, some of them are hilarious, but it's just a good reminder that the more forethought you can give into it, the better this will come out. Other things, track a data point only once. I mean, I know that sounds really logical, but I'm surprised sometimes that people are tracking the same data point or want to track it on the contact record and the household and something else, where if you have a data point once, that's enough and point to it from numerous places. So be really thinking about the beginning before you start. I mean, start from the beginning, thinking about what you want it to look like. And yes, some consultants, like Rubin mentioned, they will want to hang on to you as long as they can. I think probably our philosophies are the same. Let's do it right. Let's do it well. And then I would suggest putting something in your budget for continuing improvement, I would call it. And that is, okay, you've had a change in staff where your 2 or 3 power users are all now gone. They retired, they moved on. You might need some additional training. You might want to implement the program management module. So be thinking about that just like you would with continuing education. You want your people to stay in step, make sure that your platform stays in step as well.
Thanks, Roxanne. All right, Chandler, what would you like to add to best practices new users should keep in mind?
Yeah, little bit of a different angle comes to mind for me. Naturally, living in the integration world, I think one area that's often treated as an afterthought is integrations. And whether that be evaluating integrations or even managing integrations with your Salesforce instance once live. From our experience, oftentimes the integration world is treated like a commodity, when in all reality, all integrations are certainly not created equal. So I always encourage folks to vet integrations appropriately, right? Always look under the hood when something integrates natively, and really think to yourself, is this going to require post import cleanup, right? Does this create duplicates that are going to have to get cleaned up after the fact, right? Does the integration allow for the flexibility that I need? I think it's really important to ensure that data quality challenges, which we've talked about a lot today, caused by inadequate integrations, don't prohibit you from reaching your fundraising goals.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chandler. All right. This is the last of my questions before opening it up to our wonderful audience. So if you have any questions, this would be the perfect time to drop them in the questions tab or in the chat. But before I open that door, I want to sneak in my next question. And Roxanne, I'll have you start us off with this one. Data security and privacy are crucial in the digital world. What best practices should nonprofits follow when using Salesforce to engage with their supporters while maintaining trust and compliance with data protection regulations?
Whew, that is a big question and a hot topic, even with state by state having different laws on data privacy. I know Colorado, where I am, just enacted a new law, I think as of January 1st, and upping the privacy parameters and what that looks like. So when I think of working with donors, first of all, you don't want to tick anyone off, right? If they've asked you not to, text or email them, not that we don't want to text people, but keep their preferences in mind, because if they've asked to be removed from your list, remove them. There's even certain states and policies that require you to prove that you've removed them from everywhere and everything. So a lot of times data privacy and security can sound really scary, but there's basic things you can do. For example, don't set your password policies so that they expire once a year. That's probably not the best idea, or never. I've seen that. Have your team be changing their passwords. MFA is being required for, I think, all Salesforce platforms by this point. A few more that I'm working with popped up on my radar this last week or two. MFA is multi-factor authentication, which means that it's beyond just getting a text message that says enter the code. You actually need an authenticator app on your device. Making sure that your team is well versed in that and understand why it's important would be very helpful. Stay up to date with your security releases in Salesforce. When you pull up in the screen there, if there's a lot of red, that means you might be behind on taking care of your Salesforce releases. And when I have questions, I phone a friend. So think of who you can contact for the questions that pop up randomly. Find an expert, work with them, say, I read about this, what does that mean for me? Hopefully your consultant can help with that, but keep that phone a friend handy, because this is very much a changing landscape in terms of security.
Thanks, Roxanne. All right, Rubin, over to you. Thoughts on how to maintain trust and compliance when engaging with supporters?
Yeah. I might take a slightly different approach with this question. I mean, I think when it comes to this, it's a lot of what Roxanne said, and the Salesforce platform offers so much in terms of security. It's probably one of its strongest areas, in my opinion. But one thing I encourage from a nonprofit standpoint, from an equity and ethics perspective, is as we go through implementation, re-asking ourselves, what exactly do we need from a data perspective, and what purpose does the data serve? I've worked with some organizations, let's say in human services, that have intake processes where pages and pages and pages of data has now been migrated into Salesforce. That is pretty far-reaching. Getting into credit rating and criminal history and substance abuse history and all this. And sometimes I have to ask the client, well, what are we asking all this for? And sometimes there's legitimate reasons for it, and other times it's like, oh well, a funder many years ago asked for this, or our old executive director wanted this, and there's no need for it anymore. And unfortunately, we're in a space where that data, it used to be, oh well, as long as it doesn't have a social security number and a name, it's all fair game. But these data sets, especially in the age of artificial intelligence where we're in, really can create harm for the exact communities that we're trying to serve throughout these nonprofits. So, one thing I try to encourage is, we're kind of not at that stage now of like, let's make sure we track every possible thing, and really look at it differently and say, what do we absolutely need? So I think that sort of conversation with the nonprofits, it's tied into security, but I think it's also tied into the equity and ethics of it as well.
Thanks, Rubin. Christina, anything you want to add on how to maintain trust and being compliant?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with everything that both Rubin and Roxanne and Chandler have said. I think that it's important to build in those internal processes, and for nonprofits to actually put time internally to commit to the privacy, opt-in, opt-out, anything that has to do with the data and security regulations that they might be responsible for when it does come to their engagement strategy. At Mowgli, we partner with our clients every day on the nuances of data privacy and opt-in and opt-out. And what we have found is our most successful nonprofits actually have time and a team member that's devoted to making sure that the compliance is up to date. In a dream world, we would all have a general counsel and a security expert on our nonprofit teams, but we don't. So we lean on other team members, and also, like Roxanne said before, phone a friend and look for those resources, and trust your implementation partner and trust your app partners to shepherd you through those processes.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Christina. All right, we're officially opening our Q&A portion. We got some questions from registration, and we'll start off with this question. And Chandler, I'll have you start us off with this one. What should we consider before even getting started with Salesforce? Any advice on how to best prep? I know we talked about cleaning up data earlier, but any advice you can give this nonprofit?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've probably given hopefully some helpful tips so far to help folks, but I'll kind of circle back to something that Rubin and Roxanne touched on that I think is really important, and I see too often is especially if you're migrating from one solution to Salesforce, trying to recreate your prior solution in Salesforce. It's a really tricky path to go down. And you really aren't taking advantage of the Salesforce platform if you're trying to take that approach. The good thing is that, the Salesforce ecosystem has great folks like Roxanne and Rubin and others that can help steer you in the right direction. But that's definitely, I've seen that time and time again, and certainly something that I would encourage folks to keep an eye out for.
Thanks, Chandler. Rubin, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think besides the things that we've talked about process and data integrity, I think the key piece to it is getting the necessary buy-in from all levels of the organization. Because even after you've invested this time and energy and resources into this great system, if fundraising manager says, okay, that's nice, but make sure I have my spreadsheets on Monday morning, then you're losing some of that value in the system, and you'll slowly start seeing people move away from it. So I think just making sure you have that necessary buy-in from all levels of the organization, socializing it, communicating it, having open conversations is something that'll get you in the right foundation.
Thanks, Rubin. Roxanne, yes?
Great points. I don't want to reiterate anything, but one thing that popped into my mind here is as you think about going into Salesforce, make sure if you're the leader of the organization, allow and bless someone who is going to need to take time to work on the implementation, someone who's going to work with the consultant, someone who's going to work with the app partner. If you're expecting one person to do all of that and all of their job, you're going to end up with a very frustrated or burnt out staff member, and your project could take a long time. So keep in mind, generally implementation is a short-term project. So from the leadership side of things, see what you can do to give that person some dedicated time, whether that's 5 hours a week, whatever that looks like. Allow that cushion, give that person some margin to take care of this so it's done really well.
That's wonderful, Roxanne. Christina, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, even a internal implementation that I experienced in a nonprofit personally. And one thing that we actually didn't do well is we worked in silos. We didn't bring in the different cross-organizational groups. And that really was a blocker, even though we had a great implementation roadmap. So I would recommend make sure that you bring all your internal stakeholders to the table so you can level set expectations and so you can identify those project owners. And so, accounting is involved, not just IT and not just donor engagement.
Thanks, Christina. All right. Unbelievably, the hour is going by so quickly, so we're going to wrap up this portion of the panel so we can stick to our schedule. Now, if you have more questions for our panelists, please complete the survey that will be dropped in the chat to indicate which panelists you have questions for, and we'll make sure to connect you with them after the session. I've had such a wonderful time hearing from our panelists today, and I'm hoping to get one final piece of insight from them all. And Rubin, I'll have you start us off with this question. What do you see as the future for donor engagement, and how can nonprofits get ahead today?
Oh gosh, I think it's really just recognizing that things will change. Things are going to change. The organization is going to change. The technology is going to change. And I say the one piece of advice is no matter how much the technology evolves and improves and innovations that we see, let's not forget the human involved here. And so as we kind of think about how best to leverage the technology, make sure we're centering the participants, the employees, the users, the donors, and not lose touch with those human interactions and those handwritten notes and all those powerful things that mean so much in our space.
Thanks, Rubin. All right, Christina, thoughts on the future of donor engagement and how to get ahead today?
Yeah, I think this goes back to my previous point on the value and the importance of an omni-channel engagement strategy. If you're new to Salesforce, you're going to be amazed at how much time that you can save with flows and automations, but really the value of those human-to-human touch points cannot be understated. So being able to build in that beautiful omni-channel engagement strategy with all of the amazing technology on top of what already your organization and your mission support with your wonderful human resources and folks who work with every day, I think is really key and is of the utmost importance for nonprofits to keep at the top of their minds.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christina. Roxanne, over to you. What do you see as the future and how to get ahead today?
Yeah, I would just focus on your strategy for donor engagement. Have a plan, have a strategy, have your goals. be thinking about different ways to bring in that revenue. So gosh, just in the last, I don't know how many, 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years, monthly giving has become really, really important, right? So if you're ignoring monthly giving and don't have it at the top of your strategy, I would definitely take a look at that, because I know even after 2020, 2021, there were studies done about how many monthly donors actually stopped their monthly donation in the midst of the global pandemic, and a super small percentage actually made the effort to stop that donation. First of all, because they probably didn't want to go through the process. They thought the nonprofit still needs this. But the fact that so many monthly givers hung on through a global pandemic is huge. So when you have the monthly donors, you can forecast, use the tools in Salesforce to do that, other tools, apps that can help with that. But if you have a strategy and you can start forecasting, you can have a plan that's really solid that will see you into the ever-changing climate of platforms, technology, and all that's involved. I mean, the best way to say is, you expect the unexpected. So if you're prepared to expect the unexpected, then you can at least jump over those hurdles with some grace and grit, I think is the word Christina had on her bio.
Thanks, Roxanne. All right, Chandler, what do you see as the future for donor engagement, and how can nonprofits get ahead today?
Yeah, I think for me, and agree certainly with Roxanne, Rubin, and Christina, but for me, it's personalization at scale is really what we're after, right? And when we think about it, in every other aspect of everyday life, our supporters are being delivered relevant, personalized content. And we as nonprofit organizations are competing with that, right? We're competing for our supporters' attention. And, I have a firm belief that personalizing engagement allows us to break through the noise. And if you remember kind of where we started kind of this whole conversation, and I would encourage folks not to forget, donor engagement impacts revenue in a real way.
Absolutely important. Thank you so much, Chandler. All right. And with that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I also want to give a big thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned something that will benefit the work that you do on a daily basis. We do have a packed few months of panels ahead of us, and I hope that you will join us for them. So keep an eye out on the NXUnite website or on the NXUnite LinkedIn page to make sure you don't miss out on any of these. All right, that is it for me. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and have a nice rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.